Welcome to Live from America podcast. This is Hatem. Alongside me, as usual, the one and only Free Speech Defender Award winner, Noam Dworman.
I thought that was
Hello.
going to be me. Am I not a free speech advocate?
Oh, did
I
you
guess
win
I've
an
never won an
award?
award.
Yeah, he won an award and he had a speech. It was amazing. And one of our favorite guys on and off the field, Elie Honig, CNN legal and senior legal analyst, great friend, great performers. He had a great performing piece that I will promise to publish soon about the mob at the Comedy Cellar.
Well,
Great
we
to
got to
have.
do that again. We got to do that again. Just if people are confused, I am not a stand-up comic. I've never claimed to be one, but we did this storyteller series at the Cellar, and I got up there and told the story about one of my mob prosecutions, which was a real thrill.
Which was and you know what's funny is like I ask a lot of the people that perform in that show because most of them are on TV all the time. Is it different being comedian than being, on TV
Oh,
all the time still? And you said
it's totally different, right? I mean, it's
you
100%
were
different.
great though. You and Danny, I mean everybody pretty much,
Yeah, it
were
was a
very
good show. It
comfortable,
was
but you
really
were
fun.
very comfortable.
Yeah, we had a full house. Everyone was great. It was we even got some laughs. So yeah,
And
I'll
guess who
take it.
came back from inauguration? This guy right there.
I was invited to the Liberty Ball, but it was just a debacle there. Nobody couldn't get a car near it. It was colder than New York City. It was like close to zero. Um, they shuttled us into a hallway. We waited there for like 2.5 hours, and they told us, sorry, it's a fire hazard. You have to leave. They turned us all around. We went out on the street again. We went in through the magnetometers. We got in. It was empty. Nobody even understands why they were shuttling everybody out. We were VIPs. And then we stayed like 7 or 8 minutes because it was it was dull, and I wasn't going to wait another 2 or 3 hours for Trump to speak. So that was it. I didn't. The nicest part, we watched the ceremony in the hotel lobby with a real diverse group of people. There were black people there, Indian people. There were the people who worked in the hotel. There were rich donors. It was very real cross section. And it was a real nice when they sang the national anthem. Everybody stood up. I videotaped it, and of all walks of life, everybody was feeling American and respectful. And it probably lasted, 30 seconds after that until Trump pardoned all the January 6th criminals. But it was nice while it lasted.
Let me give you my inauguration story. It's actually in some ways similar. So I took the Amtrak down the 6 a.m. train that day. CNN wanted me down there in our DC bureau. The train, usually that train is A, silent, half full, and B, all, Northeast corridor types. That day it was like MAGA party train. It was packed, every seat, people who from all over the country, people who'd flown into Newark or people got on in Baltimore, all the different hats, trading merch, party. I was in the quiet car. It was not observed. Usually the quiet car cops are very aggressive in policing you, but it was nice to see. Like, look, Noam knows I don't really, I mean, I'm pretty moderate, but that's not exactly my political scene. But it was cool to see people from a lot of international people. Like Noam said, when I got to Union Station in DC, there was a big group of people from Ghana there who were just forget about who Trump or Republicans, Democrats, whatever. They just wanted to see this ceremony, which was very cool
Yeah.
to sort of see. So I like the inauguration, no matter who it is. I thought it was a little bit. I don't know. I missed the outdoor tableau. That view of like the president to be in front of the Capitol with people in front of him is kind of majestic. But this one had its virtues too, I guess.
I gotta tell you, it's I'm happy that wasn't outside because he would spend a week saying he had more crowd than anybody, and no, it's just like
Right.
no, yes, you have less crowd, and it just this is much better.
I would make just one more comment. I think that moderate people on both sides of the aisle are backing into this kind of complacency and acceptance of the fact that, you know, these people are just creeps. Trump is a creep. Biden turned out to be a creep in many ways, creepier than we thought, much worse than I thought. Um, we have a crisis of competence within government. We see it in California, we see it in New York, we see it in the federal government. Trump has certain, pulls in a certain common sense direction that this subset of Trump pulls in a certain common sense direction. I think, like 70, 80% of the country give him the choice between where he pulls on certain things and they prefer him. They can't stand him. He also pulls in certain directions we can't stand. We don't trust him because he's erratic and he does disgusting things like pardoning the the people who attack cops while he's complaining about law. I mean, but if you're a principled person, whatever principle you set up for yourself, you realize that nobody can stand that light on any side. It's very disheartening, and you just hope. Now I'm just at the point where, I just hope he gets the things done that I agree with, and that he doesn't go too far in the area that I clearly don't agree with, and we can just at some point turn the page on a new generation that maybe in some way will react against all this, kind of the way Jimmy Carter claimed he was going to do, just clean up the act of our leaders. It's very disheartening, but and it's easy to lose perspective because the country's still pretty damn great, and our lives are pretty great, and in other countries, when they have terrible leaders, they don't need to turn on the news to figure that out. They feel it and see it all around them. And with us, if you don't turn on the news, you wouldn't really know who is president most of the time, except for the inflation. So that's how I feel about it. I'm both depressed and optimistic, But this, I know we're going to talk to Elie about it, but this pardoning of the people who assaulted cops, and I say one other thing because I'm not the guest. I have friends who are pro-Trump. And their eyes glaze over. I'm like, well, how could he do this? And they have an answer for everything. It's so upsetting. Like, I get you prefer Trump, and I can even get there with you. Like, yeah, I'm more, I don't want 4 years of Kamala Harris, but how can you defend the indefensible? But they do.
So, no, I was interested to see where you came out on this, Noam, because you are generally a Trump supporter. And I was wondering, is he going to have one of these excuses for these January 6th pardons? So
Me too.
let me sort of tick through the various excuses that I've heard and explain why each of them is bullshit. Now, look, okay, excuse number one, well, it's his constitutional power. Of course it is. It's legal for him to issue these pardons. Of course it is. But none of that is the point. The point is, are these reasonable, fair, decent, just, and righteous pardons? That's just a complete dodge. Point number two is Trump said something like, well, there are murderers who don't do more time than this. But that rationale would justify any kind of pardon to anybody ever, anywhere. And then there's sort of generalities about, well, they were over prosecuted or there were violations. I mean, maybe in individual cases, but there was no individualization happening here. In fact, we've seen the reporting now that he just said, F it, like we're doing all of them at once. And I will also say this, Donald Trump did something that Joe Biden used to do to his supporters quite frequently, which is he left them hanging on a limb. Joe Biden did it with Hunter Biden, right? Joe Biden said for months, I will not pardon Hunter Biden. And you saw Adam Schiff and all these people making these high-minded, sanctimonious speeches about this is why we're great and they're bad. And then what did Joe Biden do? He bit him in the ass and he said, actually, I am going to pardon Hunter Biden. Also, my brothers and sisters and all that. We'll get back to that. But Trump did the same thing. Trump didn't ever quite say, I'm not going to pardon the violent people, but he certainly suggested it.
I think Vance did.
Vance said, obviously, quote, obviously, you shouldn't pardon. I mean, a lot of reasonable Republicans said you can't pardon the violent folks. And he did. And now they're all running away from Manu Raju and literally and saying, I didn't see it. I haven't seen it. And it puts them in a bad spot. But I think these pardons will go down. It's not shocking to say is historically disgraceful. Yeah.
There's one more excuse you didn't mention, which is he said Biden did it, so I'm going to do it.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, look, I can go to the elementary school a few blocks away and get a second grader and say, what's wrong with that? And he will go, well, two wrongs don't make a right. Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah. Like, I mean, yes, like I have plenty of criticism of the Biden pardons as well. Yeah. But how on earth does that justify? I mean, where are we in like this? Just, it would be a pure race to the bottom. What's the next guy going to do?
By the way, it's just interesting you said that you perceive me as a Trump supporter. You don't know me prior to Trump. I never liked Trump. I remember saying that I found him to be disgusting and unpatriotic when he was attacking Obama about the birth certificate. He's finding a lot of interesting things. I never was a supporter of the guy. I always felt, though, and I couldn't, it's just my nature, that the people attacking him were making a lot of flimsy arguments all the time. And I was just like, well, that doesn't hold up. And almost everything that I took a stand on, I I did turn out to be right about, how everything was going to turn out. I always thought he was guilty of obstruction of justice. They never got him on that.
In
I
the
thought for a
documents.
while he was guilty of the phone call with Georgia until I listened to the actual phone call and say, no, that doesn't seem like a crime. The Bragg thing was ridiculous. Russiagate seemed ridiculous. I didn't like that he called Kim Jong-un Rocket Man and stuff like that. There's a lot of things about. I don't trust that. If you saw my text messages from 2016, I'd be like, this guy's erratic. I wouldn't hire him to run my restaurant, let alone run the country. I'm not.
Well, that's because you're a New Yorker. You understand. You've known who this guy is. You get it, and that's true. You're not one of these people who sees him as sort of holier than that. I grew up. Listen, I'm from South Jersey, and I remember as a kid getting this because we would get the Atlantic City area TV ad, right? The Philly market would hit my house and Atlantic City, and we would get the Trump Plaza Hotel and Casino ads and all that. And even then, I remember being 8 years old going like, not so sure about this cat. But yeah, no, you are definitely not a person with starry eyes about Trump. I think you're pretty clear-eyed. And I think a lot of the criticisms, not all, but a lot of the criticisms you just laid out, I wrote my second book, which we had the event at for both of my books at the Cellar. You were very generous. But the second book I wrote in 2022 into early 2023. And I voiced all these criticisms. And I said, there are real problems with the way these cases are being charged and prosecuted. And anyone who thinks he's going to end up in a jail cell has an awakening coming. And, for better or worse, all of those predictions, I don't really do predictions, but all of those analyses turned out to be correct.
And people called you Trump, and people accused you of supporting Trump.
Oh, I was drummed out of, it's fine. Like, it's a circle I don't really want to be part of. But, as you guys know, there is a strong liberal bent in the legal world, in the legal analysis world. And I was a heretic because I wasn't just cheerleading everything Alvin Bragg did and everything Jack Smith did and everything Letitia James did and Bonnie Willis. And I think every one of them has, to varying degrees, proven that they were not that they were not worthy of the task.
So if we take the pardons, like more specifically, like Trump and then Biden. So these guys that were pardoned, is it in the record? Can they own a gun? Can they do another offense? Like if they do they have to see what's
Well, they pardoned or they're commuted? If it's commuted, go ahead.
So there's two levels, right? Mostly everybody was pardoned, meaning it's wiped off the books. Hatem, there's actually it's sort of jurisdiction state by state specific as to how, there is an open question. Well, do you get all your rights back? If you're filling out an application that says, are you a felon? Do you have to click, have you ever been convicted? Yeah, you were convicted, but then it was erased. But there are a lot of rights that go into to own a gun, to get benefits, jury, voting, all that stuff. For the most part, I think it's safe to say you do get those rights back. Then there's a smaller group of, I think, 14, including some of the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys, where it was a commutation, which just means a sentence reduction. He reduced it down to 0, down to the time they'd already served. In that case, they don't get their rights back. The conviction still stands, but a person can be commuted and then later pardoned. It wouldn't shock me if months from now or whatever, he says, all those 14 or 16 people who I commuted, they're all fully pardoned now. And
if he had done, you said about what's the word you use, individualization or something?
Yeah, I think I made that up.
Yeah. Like, first of all, if I had done this and if I wanted to commute the violent criminals, I would issue a document which said, Joe Schmo, this is where we see a flaw, and this is why I would explain myself, as to why I thought these people deserve to have their sentence commuted. And by the way, just a thing, I think it's more likely than not that if I knew all the facts, that some of these people I saw in the video just kind of following the person in front of them into the Capitol never did have the book thrown at them. And it is heartbreaking that they were, 3 years in prison. And I probably would say, you know what, I think that person is not a criminal. But the people who raise a hand in violence, we have to draw a sharp line on that.
There's 160 plus people who were convicted of violence towards cops. I'm wondering, what if you were the new press secretary to Donald Trump and he issues this? You don't have any choice. He issues this complete blanket for everybody. What's the best political spin you could? I have an idea, but I'm interested what you got. What would be the best possible way you could spin this politically if you had to? If you were, I forget the name of his new press secretary, but whoever that is.
I don't know. I mean, that what they will probably do is say what Hatem said. Well, Biden did it, but but I would have that wouldn't come out of my mouth easily. I would stutter on that. What would you say?
I heard someone say this. I can't recall where. It may have been on the radio or something. Someone who knows what we're talking about. I thought that would have been if you have to justify this, and it's not justifiable. But the best would have been just like this is all about moving on. Like this happened. People have been punished. We don't need people straggling out of prison for the next 20 years, just in the name of sort of finality. It's similar to why Jimmy Carter pardoned Vietnam draft dodgers. It's similar to why Andrew
Ford
Johnson.
pardoned Nixon.
What's that? Right, or right, Ford and Nixon, or Andrew Johnson with Confederates. It was just like fair or unfair. We just need this over with and behind us. We don't need the sort of shadow of this sticking with us. I don't think that's sufficient, but I think that's the best you could do.
He'd probably would also say it's unifying,
Yeah.
as he know. But one of the pardons that he did that I really like was Russ Ulbricht. If you remember,
Yes.
Noam, we had his mom here.
So I'm very interested why you like this, Hatem. Yeah.
Well, we had Lynn Ulbricht here in the episode, which I'm gonna re-release again. First of all,
is that his wife or mother?
Mother. She is definitely, and this is one of the things that can almost make me cry. Is like the love of parents is just unbelievable. This woman every day will go to any event. If there's 7-Eleven event, she was gonna go and talk about it. And she did not stop. And so many presidents, by the way, promised her, and even Trump himself the first time, and I didn't have it, but now I have. I like it because I don't think it was. We actually looked at the case, and it's just like I think it's like first of all he was charged as kingpin, and he had nobody else in the crew. At least I think he's supposed to have 5 at least in your crew. 2 life sentences and 40 years. It was just too much for a kid.
Well, I remember what I didn't like about it, and this apparently is something that goes on in the law. I don't remember it from studying the law, and it really rubs me the wrong way, is that he was convicted of something, he probably did it, and then the judge brought into the sentencing all sorts of things that people had said he had done that they never had to prove that he did, and then the judge used this as a basis to give him a stiff sentence.
Yeah.
And that offended me no end. Like, if this is the reason he's spending the rest of his life in jail, then you have to prove those things, and they didn't.
So let me pick up on that. So first of all, I do not support the pardon of Russ Ulbricht. I didn't prosecute it. It was done at the Southern District of New York shortly after I left. Maybe the case started when I was there, but different unit. And colleagues of mine prosecuted the case. I mean, look, his conduct is really bad, right? He ran essentially Silk Road is essentially like Amazon, but if everything on it was drugs and other illegal, services and activities and that kind of thing. That's number one. He did it for a long time. He moved hundreds of millions of dollars worth of drugs. I will agree with you that a life sentence for that is a lot. And a commutation to 20 years, 30 years would be more defensible. I'm still not on board with it. Maybe this is my old school prosecutorial sort of hardliner, but Noam raises a really good point. And this is something people don't understand about the law. Judges can sentence somebody who's gone to trial based on other conduct, even if they were acquitted for it. So in other words, in order to convict someone at trial, you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. But at sentencing, a judge just has to find by a preponderance. So judges can take conduct in this case or any other case and say, well, the jury didn't find you guilty on this, or even perhaps the jury found you not guilty on this, but I find it by the lower standard, and therefore I sentence on it. And this is going all the way up to the Supreme Court, but I agree with you. It's very shady. I'll tell you real quick about a mob case I did. We did a case against a guy named Eddie Boyle, who, I'll give you the details. Eddie Boyle's best friend was this guy, Frank Heidel. Frank Heidel was cooperating with the cops. This was like in 92 or something. And the Gambino family found out about it. They lured Frank Heidel to Scarlet Strip Club in Queens, which I don't think exists any longer. And Eddie Boyle, who was his friend, ran up to him and shot him in the head and the back and killed him. I was supervising the unit. I didn't try the case, but we charged Eddie Boyle with RICO. And it was a whole bunch of acts. It was that murder was the headliner, and then there was extortions and robberies and all this other crap he had done, stolen property. The jury found that RICO was proved, but when they had to go through the acts, they said on the murder, not proved, but then proved on all the other lower stuff. Okay, fast forward to sentencing, and the judge says, well, I know the jury said not proved on murder, but I find by the lower standard that he did commit that murder, and she maxed him out as a result. And I have no sympathy for Eddie Boyle. I have no sympathy for Ross Ulbricht, but I do think that's a very fair criticism of the way our law works.
Let me ask you this. What's the difference if I'm sure people move drugs and launder money in Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that. What's the difference? Because one of the things that they were
Yep.
saying that he didn't know, he created a platform. His whole idea was kind of like libertarian, like away from the government, Bitcoin, like all that, you know.
It's cryptocurrency,
Yeah.
cryptocurrency for the marketplace. Yeah.
Yeah. So how is
Legally,
that different from
yeah.
Facebook or Instagram?
Well, legally, there's no difference if you're selling drugs on Facebook or on Silk Road or hand to hand, on the subway. But it becomes A, way more easy to prove. B, like, the key is knowledge. Did he know? If you told me that there were drugs being sold in some corner of Amazon, it would be really hard to prove Jeff Bezos know about that. But this guy's running a site that essentially only does illegal activity. I mean, you can't go on Silk Road and buy canned beans or something. You know what I mean? Like it's only can't buy the bestseller books. It's basically only for criminal activity. So the notion that he didn't know is completely implausible and was rejected by the jury and rejected by the court. But it's legally, and then finally for sentencing. I mean, for sentencing, you do take into account quantity and how much you were moving and how much money you made and all that.
Listen, the guy was in jail for a very long time. He's a kid. He did something stupid. Kids don't
He's
think
40
about
now.
now. I'm talking about when he
Yeah,
did
he
it.
did it when he was 30, maybe. And what was he in jail for? I think the trial was what, like 13 or 14 or something? Yeah, I guess he's done
I don't
something
know,
like
but
that.
and of course the younger generation has and had a different attitude about drugs for a long time, and the country's coming around to that slowly but surely. And I don't remember the details of the case, but if he spent 10 years in jail,
But you,
I
but
think
you guys
I
remember
think
why? You guys know why Trump did it. He didn't do it because he took a careful look at this
Yeah, no, he
file,
promised that
right?
libertarian. Yeah, the vote. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because it was like almost a quid pro quo for this Libertarian Party
Well,
vote.
I remember when they went when he went to the Libertarian Party because Dave Smith and a few people I know were there, and they won. They were booing him the whole time, and then when he said on day one I'm gonna pardon Russ Albert, that's the only time that they were like clapping for him, and things turned around. So it's kind of deep, but he did say he's gonna do it the first time around, by the way, and he didn't. You know, but anyway, I just think
10 years, and I think other countries feel this way. 10 years is a long time in jail for almost any crime, unless you are, I mean, and I'm not soft on crime. If you're a threat to society, then I would lean on keeping you in prison. Or if you've done something that has tremendous victimization, it just doesn't sit right. But
Yeah. By the way, I should add
yeah,
the judge on that case, Judge Forrest, is if you ever, God help you, if you ever get indicted in the SDNY, your case could get assigned to any of 30, 40 judges. That's the last one you want. She is a brutal sentencer, over the top sentencer. In fact, it's quite rare to see a life sentence in a non-murder case.
Yeah,
And she's one of the only judges who will do that.
that was a
it's hard,
double
it's hard
sentence.
Again, I oppose every aspect of this pardon. I just want to be clear.
But you know what? But there is something to this also. And this, when we get to the Biden pardons, we should talk about it too. Is that there would be something very principled about pardoning Ross Ulbricht, and then also seeking to find everyone else, maybe who didn't have the publicity, who's in the same, apparently unfair position,
Right.
and commute them all. Then, like in other words, if this is unconscionable. Is he the only one in that unconscionable situation? Stand on principle, find them and release them. That would be more respectable.
And that's exactly what a friend of mine who was a Biden advisor said he should have done. This person said what with Hunter. This person said what Biden should have done is tell DOJ, find me 50 cases where you had someone who was an addict who committed a non-violent, stupid little offense, and I'll pardon all 50 of them, including Hunter. And of course, everyone will notice Hunter, but at least I'll be able to package it as something bigger than I'm pardoning my son and F you all.
So for
Go
Biden's
ahead.
pardons, here's the problem I have is like, obviously I don't like the Trump pardons either, but these guys did a crime and he pardoned for the crime. Biden pardons them for something that we didn't even know what they did. It's so bad that they have that power.
Listen, Democrats are even excoriating Biden. And we're talking here about the pardons of his 3 siblings and 2 in-laws. that happened at like
And Dr.
11:48.
Fauci and
Well, I put Fauci and Millie and the January 6th committee members a little different. That one I'm sort of, I don't know. I'm 50
but the date on
that one.
Fauci is the one I'm talking about more specific. Like,
Well, I have my own thoughts about them. I'm gonna let Elie go first.
Well, let me talk about the family ones first.
Sure.
Yeah.
Those to me are indefensible and an outrage. And the only thing that Biden has said is sort of like, well, Trump said he would prosecute them. Why? First of all, yeah, I mean, he didn't say he would, but that he would look into them. But how does that justify anything? And here's the question that I have for Joe Biden and people around him. There are a lot of adult members of the Biden family. There's a lot more than those 5. Why are those 5 the ones that you chose to pardon? Somebody said, yes, that person gets a pardon. Not that family member, though. He or she doesn't need it, but she needs it. He needs it. She doesn't. He doesn't. Somebody, presumably Joe Biden, but somebody is deciding who did stuff that was shady enough, that was close enough to the line that they might need a pardon versus other people who did not. So, look, I don't buy into all of these theories about Joe Biden and China and Hunter Biden. But the fact of the matter is a lot of Joe Biden and a lot of his relatives have gotten awfully rich off the family name. Influence peddling is not a crime, but it's seedy and it may be worse than that. We don't really know. But how does Joe Biden and his family have so much wealth for a guy who's never in 50 years made more than a government salary? I don't know the answer to that. And I think this was complete cronyism and just a final disgrace to the way Joe Biden has used the pardon power.
Well, okay, let me work backwards. I basically agree with you. First of all, I think that Biden was desperate to pardon people who are not members of his family to somehow dilute the look of this. So Fauci and the rest of them, they've been, I don't know if Fauci really was going to get a pardon otherwise, but I said, well, let me find Fauci and Cheney and whoever else I can pardon. At least it doesn't look like I'm just, but it really obviously the target is his family. And of course, Elie didn't mention this, but he would have, is that once he pardoned Hunter, then Hunter can no longer take the 5th. I don't know if you want to
let me correct that if I can. Sorry,
yeah.
Noam. People say that a lot, but it's not true. And people said the same thing when Trump pardoned Manafort and Stone, right? You had liberal analysts going, aha, now they can be compelled to testify and they can't take the 5th. Of course they can. They all can, because they still have state liability. So if you're Hunter Biden and you get a subpoena and they go, oh, you've been pardoned for everything federally, go, so what? I could still be prosecuted in the state. I could still be prosecuted by the state of Delaware, state of New York, state of California. Like, the bar to invoke the 5th Amendment is so low. No judge is going to be like, well, are they really investigating you? That's not the question. So all these folks, from Paul Manafort to Hunter Biden, they can still take the 5th because they still have state level criminal liability.
That's interesting. I've heard otherwise, but okay, you would know.
I actually, I'll tell you a funny thing. One time I got a call when Jeff Zucker was in charge of CNN. He would take these walks and call me sometime, like he would get in conversations with his son or whoever, and he would go, hey, Elie, real quick. And he asked me that exact question because his son had heard someone on MSNBC saying, oh, we can still throw, Manafort can't take the 5th. And I was like, I gave him that exact answer. And he was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So yeah, this is a common misperception.
Onto the question of, the criminality, I, through the coincidences of my life, have been able to have conversations with some of the people who know this story from the inside, from that inner circle. And they're pretty adamant that there's crimes here. And
you're talking Biden here, Biden family.
Yeah. And there's a circumstantial thing, which is pretty interesting, which is that, everybody, the whole thing is predicated on the claim that, yeah, Hunter, but Joe Biden was never involved. Now we know some of that's been chipped away by the phone calls, but you look at people like Devin Archer and Tony Bobolinsky. Now, if we presume that it really had nothing to do with Joe Biden, these were just associates of Hunter Biden, and Joe Biden just shook hands or whatever, but was not a member of this story, Both these people dedicated their lives to getting even with Joe Biden. What kind of craziness? It's as if I fucked over Hatem on something, and my father had nothing to do with it. Right? My father just said, hey, Hatem, and left. It had nothing to do with it. And then these two people dedicate their lives to getting even with my father. Now, why would they do that? Like, who's going to go through that kind of effort for years to get even with somebody? And these were people within the Democratic circle who had nothing to do with the story. So just circumstantially, the amount of effort that these people are putting into trying to expose Joe Biden is almost, it's psychotic unless there's something to that story as a circumstantial matter.
And I guess I would say this. What is definitely true, I mean, I know people say there's no evidence Biden was involved, but I don't know what involved, where you're drawing the line of involved. Like, I'm sure, I don't believe there was ever money being funneled to him. Who knows? But here's what, like, I don't want to get into theories about what might have been, but here's what we know for sure. Joe Biden definitely knew that his son was getting paid a ton of money by Burisma to do a job that he had zero qualifications for. Like, of course, you know, I mean, if my son was getting paid, what was it, 60,000? I don't remember the amount, but tens of thousands of dollars a month for nothing. Joe Biden knew that was happening. He didn't stop it. That's at a minimum. I don't know that that's not a crime, but boy, oh boy, is that sleazy.
Yeah, well, it's worse than that because Burisma had been already identified by the State Department as criminal enterprise, and Joe Biden was in charge of Ukraine. I mean, it's as if Elliot Ness is going after Al Capone. And Al Capone hires Elliot Ness's son for millions of dollars a year, and everybody says, "Well, that's nothing. There's nothing there. That's perfectly okay." It's like, come on now. Everybody understands what's going on here. But again, is it a crime? I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah,
who knows?
Why do you think he didn't pardon himself?
I think there's just a line that he realized was too toxic to the legacy to ever. I mean, that would be all of these are.
I mean, I don't know if he can use.
I just think that's too far
with him anymore.
What's that?
Legacy. I can't hear legacy with him anymore. I don't think at this point.
And of course, is this delicious reality that the Supreme Court's immunity decision protects Joe Biden to a large extent, and of course Biden is happy about that. Well, it's just like I said in the beginning of my opening. It'll be nice when we can turn the page on this whole chapter of really subpar, and this also includes the candidates, Kamala Harris. It's just like, this is the United States of America. We have such talented, decent, good people here. There's got to be some way we can have these people as our leaders again.
Both parties have very talented second tiers right now, benches, right? I mean, if you look at some of the moderate state governors, you look at Democrats have Whitmer and Shapiro and Pritzker and Roy Cooper. There are other Republican governors who are talented, but both sides have this hammerlock. I mean, the Republican side is just Donald Trump. Like, that's it. Whatever he says goes. But at least he's producing wins for the team. Right now, complete wins. The Democrats, I don't know why there is this rule within Democratic circles: thou shalt not question or criticize Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Jill Biden, Joe Biden, on down the line. Like, I said to a friend of mine who was very defensive, I said, if you were a fan of a football team and that team went 4-13 for 3 consecutive seasons, would you say, no, our coach is great and you can't say anything about him? Or would you be rip shit that your coach had driven you into the gutter? Because whoever's right or wrong or has better ideas, forget about it. Just, you're losing. You're getting your ass kicked. And the way that they handled and mishandled the whole Joe Biden age scenario and the dropping out and the backstabbing and the handoff at the last minute was a complete disaster. And if this was any other organization, you would fire all the leadership. And by the way, all these folks are 75 years old plus, but they won't relinquish power. How does Chuck Schumer? The guy just lost the majority in the Senate. Not every, but traditionally, when that happens, you respectfully step aside as your party leader and you cede to the next person. This guy is gripping to power till the very last breath they all have. And same with Jill Biden. And I'm saying Jill here, Joe as well, but Jill's just as complicit. They get addicted to power. They cannot engage in any actual succession execution. And it's killing the party. And if the Republicans don't think about what happens after Trump, they'll find themselves in the same position eventually. And
by the way, I'll make the point that it's really all the Democrats' fault, because if you take a snapshot in time of circa 2010, you can find a quote from Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Mayor Bloomberg, all of them saying things that are indistinguishable from Donald Trump's current positions. Mm-hmm. Like Donald Trump is not, for the most part, saying outlandish things about the border, about crime, about middle, about anything. These are the Democrats just move so far to the left that Mayor Bloomberg, who I think, my goodness, wouldn't Los Angeles have been happy to have Mayor Bloomberg as mayor before and after handling the threat of fires, like a serious person, right? Mayor Bloomberg couldn't get 2 votes in the current Democratic Party, and that's at least the last time he tried, because they had been so enamored with these left-wing irrelevancies, to everyday lives, and now I think they're kind of waking up, and because you can't spend 10 years not hiring people because they're the best person for the job. You can do a little bit of that, but when you just wholesale, we no longer even think it matters to have the best person. Competency doesn't matter. It's just diversity, and all of a sudden it does come back to snap you in the ass, and that's what's happening in cities all over the country and the Biden administration. And this is the way the pendulum swings back.
Well, don't worry. Gavin Newsom's going to order an investigation of what went wrong. It's like, hey, I have a place to start. How about the Mirror? Like, what human being has had more influence over California politics? He was, mayor, lieutenant governor over the last 20 years than Gavin Newsom. But he's like, I want answers. Like, why don't you start with yourself? Well, you guys, I'm sure you guys, like me, have friends, liberal-ish Hollywood friends in LA. Boy, the texts I was getting, like, I have never seen liberals turn on Democrats that week. I mean, a good friend of mine who gets angry with me every time I say something on air that's not the hard liberal talking point, just sent me like, this is a complete failure of leadership. This is disgraceful. The performance by Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom. I mean, you guys, I'm sure you've had similar, you guys are in the entertainment world.
And I would distinguish it. You have certain events like October 7th or 9/11, which caught leadership flat-footed, but there was a failure of imagination. Who could imagine they drive the planes and fly the planes? Who could imagine Hamas would do this? But then you have other things more like Katrina, where everybody has known all along about this threat. People have been talking about the threat. Yep. It happened exactly the way people who said it was going to happen said it was going to happen, and they just didn't do anything about it. And these are the kind of leaders that, now there is always this irony that when a good leader does a good job, kind of like Bloomberg, he can never get the credit for all the horrible things he prevented, right? Because they didn't happen. Mm-hmm. But that is what a good leader has to be. Los Angeles knew about this risk, and they did nothing. Now, of course, maybe there would have still been some fire, but I'm sure it didn't have to be like this.
Yeah. Speaking of 9/11,
it's shameful.
Rudy Giuliani stepped up big time. I mean, he was a great leader when he did that back then.
At the time.
Yeah. But I was talking about
he's had some bad turns since then.
Oh yeah. Gavin
I would say Dr. Jekyll was a pretty good mayor, but Mr. Hyde fucking
like Gavin in California, like, I don't know, have you seen the movie Gone Girl?
Yes.
You remember Ben Affleck?
With Ben Affleck is the guy?
When his wife disappeared, and every time they interview him, he just like smiling and happy and like fixing his hair. Like, it seemed like, Gavin, what are you doing? Like, I don't know. So
do you guys think he has a future? Because I know the Dems were like in love with this guy and sort of eyeing him up because he's tall and has cool hair and everything, but I don't see how he survives this in terms of like larger ambitions. I don't see how he ever could vault into the presidency.
I don't see either. But that reminds me of a question I asked you about Trump. But somebody who told me, who knows Gavin Newsom, told me that he's actually much more moderate in his heart than he's become by necessity to win elections in California. Yeah. But I don't know if he can ever recover from this. And actually, that Andrew Cuomo was the same way. But I wonder, this is an interesting question. If Trump had never denied his defeat, if Trump did not maintain that he was robbed, do you think he still could have won in this past election? In other words, do you think that this was somehow necessary to this comeback, to fight for the fact that he was robbed? He rallied people rather than saying, I'm a loser,
right?
Give me another chance.
That's so interesting. I mean, I guess if you want to play out the counter narrative. So Trump loses 2020, gets on mic the next day and goes, hey, it's heartbreaking. It was really close. We did all we could, but they've won and we'll wish them the best. And that's it. And no January 6th happens then. I mean, one thing that I believe happens then is he's not prosecuted, right? I mean, obviously wouldn't be prosecuted January 6th. It didn't happen. I don't know. He probably would have still taken classified documents. That would have been a problem. But I also don't think Alvin Bragg, oddly enough, charges him in that case. I think if Trump had gone out like any other president, yeah, so I think that the pile on to Trump is much less. And I think that pile on helped spur him onwards. So I don't know. That's interesting. I mean, I guess there's an argument you can make.
I think he would win because it was a perfect storm of Joe Biden not stepping down until the last second, Kamala being Kamala, and obviously the prosecution all along, but it's a good question.
Yeah.
Why did they pick Kamala? What would why?
Before we talk about the next one, which is Trump birthright citizenship order, we'll see how.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, but before that, I'll ask you a question. They asked question. I don't know if you saw this. They asked Trump, which of the former president would you take advice from? Did you see that?
Did he say McKinley?
No, no.
He's very into McKinley now. He's
renaming presidents.
What's that?
From the living presidents, who would Trump?
From the living?
Yeah.
I think I saw that he sort of like digs Bill Clinton for some reason, right?
No, what do you think?
I would think Bill Clinton.
Yeah, he said Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
Well, that goes back to my point. They're pretty similar.
Yeah, and it's funny. He said a point that Noam you used to say it all the time back in 2020. He's like, do you know that Bill Clinton told Hillary to go and camp in Wisconsin, and she's like, no, and he's like, if she listened to him, she would have won. I can't believe that Trump actually said that.
And if Trump had listened to his advisors in 2020 and not told his constituency not to vote early, he would have won also.
Yeah,
jackass.
but just for one more thing before we go, is like, I think this is the first election that the people did not vote for somebody else to dispute that person. Like, people vote for Trump. Like last election, people voted against Trump. It's not Biden won. People voted against Trump. This election, he actually won. People voted for him.
I don't know. I think people voted against Kamala Harris and Biden. They would have voted against either. I think there were Democrats who could have won this. But
yeah. All right, let's go.
So what about birthright citizenship?
So this one I believe is doomed ultimately. I think this is one of these causes that politicians have where it's a campaign promise, it rallies the base, but they kind of know it's ultimately doomed. And an example I just made on CNN last night, I said, it's similar to when Joe Biden promised he was going to wipe out student debt. Any competent legal advisor had to tell him that's going down in the courts, and it did. But he got to say, look what I did. I fought for you. This one's going to lose in the courts. And there's two reasons. One, the 14th Amendment itself says any person who is born or naturalized in the United States and subject to its jurisdiction is a citizen. That's pretty straightforward. And I'll tell you what the counter argument is, but why it's, and then there was a Supreme Court opinion. It's 1898, so it's old, but it's still, it's still the law as of the moment that basically had this exact scenario where there was a Chinese man born, a man born in the United States to Chinese parents who were not citizens, who was denied citizenship essentially. And the Supreme Court said, no, he was born here, and that's it. The only sort of hook is, well, that term, what does it mean to be subject to this jurisdiction of the United States? And in that 1898 case, the parents had permanent domicile in the United States. But that was not the basis of the decision. The Supreme Court basically said, if you're born here, as long as you're subject to jurisdiction, as long as you can be taxed or, whatever by the government, you're a citizen. And the only exceptions would be like certain Native Americans and people who are here as the children of foreign dignitaries or something. But so basically you have the Constitution itself and a U.S. Supreme Court opinion that are on point, essentially. So I think this one loses in the courts. The arguments are happening like now. So we'll know at least if it gets put on hold. And that'll be the first round of what happens.
So my feeling about it is that it's interesting because if you could imagine a conservative wing that believed the Constitution was a living document, this would be a good case to say, yes, but in the 1800s, they didn't understand what we're facing now. And of course, it doesn't make any sense that somebody could just come here as a tourist when they're pregnant and just drop a baby. Now their whole family gets to stay. No. So if we're going to, the Constitution breathes and in the penumbras, blah, 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 blah. But,
not what the conservatives usually argue.
Yeah. But if you're going to be an originalist, I think it's pretty clear that although they never contemplated this scenario, and if they had, they might very well have not worded it that way. Because I think it shouldn't be that way. I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're probably right that it is what it is. It does seem crazy given the current, like when you have a huge country with very few people, you don't really worry about this stuff. But when you have the idea that people can come in here, sneak in here by the millions every year and drop children, and then therefore use that, as they say, to anchor, themselves and then their cousins and their wives, whatever. No country would say, yeah, that's a good policy. That's the policy we want.
I mean, there's a distinction between what's good policy and what's in the Constitution. I mean,
but
pardons are in the Constitution. Pardons suck, but they're in the Constitution.
But this is a kind of a policy amendment. I get it. It just doesn't. It doesn't make sense. It is a problem. I think everything would operate much more smoothly if there was no birthright citizenship, and then we could just legislate clearly who gets to come in and who doesn't get to come in.
There's an answer to that. It's amend the Constitution.
Yes, good. Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, I have two questions.
By the way, did you see one more great Biden thing? Is on the way out, he declared that the Equal Rights Amendment had been ratified.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you...
Well, this again goes back to my first thing. It's like we're just realizing, like, we wanted to think that Trump was so singularly awful, but Biden has really made that hard to. I mean, you could still say Trump's somehow worse, but really, a lot of the stuff Biden has done has really put blemishes on what was a much cleaner record that the Democrats did have. They really did.
I have two questions about the birthright citizenship, but just the timing of the pardons of Biden, does that tell anything? I mean, like literally while Trump is saying his speech, I mean, it's very sneaky, no?
It's like The Godfather.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the messaging of it, like the timing of it. Again, I think it was issued while Biden was in the rotunda or something. I mean, it's like, by the way, like if I'm ever advising some president, which will never happen because they shouldn't listen to me, but like, whether it's Bill Clinton pardoning Mark Rich on the last day or Donald Trump pardoning, Jeannie Pirro's husband on the last day, I would just tell all these guys, just doing it on the last day looks so damn bad. Just do it in December or something.
Yeah.
Like, right. And then doing it 11:48 a.m. or something when your term ends at noon is, I mean, just for the appearance, like, come on, like,
So I want to ask you about
he took care of all family business while the kid was being baptized. You're
right.
I would ask you about the birthright citizenship. So two questions. One, because I know a lot of people that try to come in and stuff. So one of the things that they do in the airport, first of all, if you're pregnant, they don't let you in. Second of all, you answer, they ask you if you're pregnant, and if you say no, and then can that take away from it? Can that be a way of doing it? And the other question, or maybe let's answer this one.
Well, I mean, there are policy changes that you can make about the way you police enforcement, the way you police immigration at the border, at the airports. That's different though than like we want to end birthright citizenship. In fact, I would think that the fact that birthright citizenship exists, it sounds like according to what you said, it already is informing the way we police this. If we're not letting in, say, far along pregnant women, it's because of that reality.
Yeah. So my other question, can it go down to states?
No, the states do not get to determine immigration policy and naturalization policy. There are a lot of areas that could go either way, that feds and state can have involvement in, policing drugs or that kind of thing. But immigration and foreign affairs are solely for the feds.
Okay.
Yeah. Not to say states can't assist the feds, but ultimately that's up to the feds. And guys, I should say I got to run in like 5 minutes.
Okay.
Sorry,
I want to ask you,
because this
really bothers me about TikTok. Can Elon Musk buy TikToks? But because I don't want him to buy anything else. Isn't there an antitrust law?
Oh, that's interesting. So I mean, I suppose if antitrust basically says we don't want too much power in any one industry concentrated in any one person. There's a couple problems. Problem number one is who's going to enforce it? I mean, DOJ has the antitrust division. So is this DOJ going to be super aggressive?
That's the first one is conflict of interest right there.
Well, yeah, but those don't, I mean, I don't even know to what extent those matter anymore. But you're right. I mean, there would be a conflict of interest, but you would have to find a prosecutor who doesn't have a conflict, maybe even a special prosecutor or something. But it wouldn't even be necessarily criminal. It would be civil enforcement against this antitrust arrangement. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wonder if there gets to a point where too much media control is concentrated in one person's hand that we start to look for antitrust, solutions to that. I don't think we're there, but if someone were to buy TikTok, I don't know. And by the way, with regard to TikTok, I mean, there was a skit on Saturday Night Live. Did you guys see this on Weekend Update where the new guy, what's his name? One of the new guys. It was fun. Michael Longfellow came out and he basically did it from the point of view. And I was like, wow, he hit the nail on the head. he was like a teenager who was pissed off about TikTok being suspended, and he goes, "By the way, this is the first political view I've ever had." And I was like, "Yeah, like all my,
My
like
daughter.
all my daughter is like, what's happening?" Like I was like, "I'm going to DC." She goes, "Is it about TikTok?" I go, "No, it's about the new attorney general." And she goes, "Ah, who cares?" But I mean,
my daughter too. My daughter
Yeah.
too. She's like, Dad, I
Yeah.
hate Joe Biden.
well, I mean, people like the kid. I mean, listen, from a pure politics point of view, for Trump to put himself out there as the guy who saved TikTok is brilliant marketing and brilliant politicking. Now, he's kind of fudging the law, because what the law says, if the president certifies that there are sort of advanced negotiations towards a sale and there's legally binding agreements in place, you can put it on hold. It's obviously not anywhere near that point, but Trump was just like, close enough, on hold. And it's like, who's going to challenge it? TikTok's not going to challenge
legally,
it.
you think legally you think it's gonna keep going or done?
Well, the law was upheld. I mean, the law was upheld by the Supreme Court unanimously.
Yeah.
They're either going to have to continue to buy more time, have a sale to a U.S. owner, or it's banned. I mean, the only way around that is if Trump instructs the executive branch, even though this law is on the books, you are not to enforce it, because all the enforcement, all the fines would have to run through the executive branch. But that's borderline lawless to just say, well, here's the law that just passed by huge bipartisan majority, 360 to something and 360 to 50 something in the House, 79-18 in the Senate, 9-0 in the Supreme Court. And then to say we're just going to ignore it is a very aggressive sort of lawless move. But again, I feel like it's a scenario where the politicians wanted to be able to say we're strong in national security, we're tough on China, but they didn't really want to be blamed for TikTok being taken out of business. So
Yeah.
I don't know how that one's going to play out. It's going to be really interesting.
I know you both gotta go. Noam, any last questions?
I had one, but it slipped my mind. Anyway, it's going to be a fun 4 years. I'm going to tell you that.
I'm ready. Is this
Yeah.
good or bad for the comedy market?
Well, I think I think Trump is likely to be good for business in general. I will say one thing that, just about, we have this building that we bought on McDougal on 3rd Street. It's coming up on 2 years. In April, it'll be 2 years. We're at the beginning of February now. We have not been able to drive a nail into a wall yet. This is how long it takes to. Now, the Empire State Building, as I always like to say, was built in 13 months. I've had a building for 20, 21 months and not been able to, a single story building, not been able to get. If you think about that and then multiply it by basically every property in the fucking United States of America, this regulation, this strangulation of business is real.
Yep.
And people need to be able to accept that you might hate Trump, but he might just have a point about that, and to the extent that he allows business to get up off the mat a little bit, especially small business, he can unleash some positive prosperity here. So I know that wasn't exactly the question. Then, of course, Trump is just better for comedy because he's easier to. But Biden was not too bad for comedy, right? Mine was pretty. I mean, Dana Carvey did a hell of a.
I was going to say Dana Carvey, of course, got the cadence just right. Yeah.
Except we don't need any more Trump impersonators.
No. People have to find new ways in here. Right? No more impersonators. No more he's orange. Like people need. That's going to be the comedians who watch this. Like you need to find a new way in that hits, but that's not the same old, same old crap.
And boy, Elie, I won't make you. You can just blink like a hostage if you agree with me.
I know where you're going. Yeah.
But boy, do we need the press to change. I mean, the way they covered for Joe Biden, claiming he was, and not only claiming that he was perfectly fine, best Biden ever, all the videos are fakes, but then trying to make the case that Trump was non-compos mentis. As soon as Trump won the election, I haven't heard a single story about how Trump is senile again.
Well, let me say
what happened.
Yeah. I will say this about Biden. At CNN, we were very aggressive, very skeptical of the Biden's just fine story.
CNN deserves a medal for right after the debate, they turned on him.
Even before that, if you look at some of the coverage from Jake Tapper and others, they were very skeptical of this, sharpest Joe Biden ever claim. But look, there's a lot of people who have to answer. The supporters and the White House staff who was saying that, You know, I don't know.
But
how
they're
gonna
doing
answer
it
that
again
question.
now with Elon Musk and this Hitler thing. Elon Musk is not saying Heil Hitler.
Oh.
It's just so absurd.
We forgot to talk about that.
By the way, so Tim Walz doing the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, actually, some of the pictures I thought that's ridiculous. But I saw actually Tim Walz hit his heart and go like this. But the point is, Elon Musk is adamantly pro free speech. He's adamantly against anti-Semitism. He thinks he says he's he feels that he's innerly Jewish. He did a whole speech about how Hamas is anti-Semitic, and it's like this guy is like, they need to stop with this stuff.
I
not
agree
saying
with you
Heil
on this
Hitler.
part, but you should give the same courtesy to anybody that does that in the future as well.
Aspirationally Jewish, he says. This is what the Nazis are now. You know, free speech extremists and hate anti-Semites. That's the current Nazi. Maybe we should hear the Nazis out.
We'll talk about this the next one. Well, Elliot, thank you so much.
They're irredeemable in a way. The press seems to me. I don't know. And I'm not a Musk fan. The same thing. If I mean, certain things about Musk I like, but I don't defend Musk and all sorts of things he does. I think, what is this guy doing? But he's not saying Heil Hitler.
Yeah, but it was bad. We can talk about it when you come back.
It wasn't bad.
I don't think he was saying Heil Hitler either, but you know, because he did it wrong. But
you know how it's done. All right, Ellie's got to go.
Ellie, thank you
guys.
so much. We got to bring them up. Sirius back. We'll talk about it. I'll text you after.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I got to come by. We'll hang out soon. Love hanging at your place. Glad to be with you guys. This was fun.
No,
I told my daughter.
good-
I told my daughter I'm going to Auschwitz. So this is true. There's no credit. She asked me if they had snow globes.
What?
For
Oh, like in a
souvenirs.
gift shop?
She loves. Whenever I go away on a trip,
Don't
whenever I go on a
embarrass
trip, I
her
bring
with that
a snow globe.
story on public. Come on.
I'm
Oh,
gonna
why?
hold on.
Oh,
I'm gonna
man.
tell you a
Sorry,
story
guys.
after-
She's a
I'm
little
gonna tell you
girl.
a
She doesn't
story
know.
after we get off.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Well, guys, thank you so much, Ellie. Great to have you.
Bye.
I'll have
Sorry.
you. Thank you very much.